Hi there. People like Howard Thurman and Gustavo Gutierrez looking at scripture through the lens of poverty, marginalization, and oppression gave us the gifts of liberation theology. Themes of liberation were always in scripture, but our Western approach to the gospel had lost them. And so, through their lives and their lens, they helped us rediscover something that was always there. In the same way, the gift of the LGBT community is illuminating aspects of our faith, scripture, and our ways of being in the world that fall short of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And they are helping us discover aspects of the gospel that we have overlooked. One of the places where I am finding gifts from the LGBTQ community is in illuminating issues of marriage and human sexuality. And by human sexuality, I don't mean gay or straight or otherwise. I mean the God created, God given ways in which we seek intimacy with other humans. I want to tell you the story of Chuck and David, two men I met at my ministry internship placement. Chuck and David were always together, active in the church, and two of the most welcoming and gracious individuals I've ever had the privilege to meet. It was clear that they were a couple. After knowing them for a while, I got to hear their story. These two men married one another in their early 20s in a service between themselves and their own home. Using the United Methodist Book of Worship, they said marriage vows to one another. 30 plus years later, after the Supreme Court legalized same sex marriage, they chose to officially legally marry on the sidewalk outside Capitol Hill United Methodist Church. It was on the sidewalk because that was city property and not church property, where gay marriage was still not allowed. Clearly, their commitment was a covenantal love commitment, but it wasn't a commitment that fit within the bounds of societal or religious norms on marriage. Contrast that with my own history in my own marriage. I went into my first marriage knowing the day I married that I was making a mistake. I knew that the wounds that lived inside of me, wounds of sexual abuse, wounds of the trauma of the purity culture in the conservative Christian tradition, created a lack of wholeness inside me. I would eventually seek counseling and heal from these wounds, but my marriage didn't make it. I firmly believe that in this case, our divorce was the holy option for me, for my ex husband, and for my two children, because we all moved from a place of deep brokenness to greater wholeness over time. The journey with my LGBTQ friends, with my own stories, with the couples that I counsel in marriage, with our nation's wrestling over sexual abuse scandals, civil rights issues for the LGBTQ community has led me to ponder the following questions, questions which you'll get to reflect on in a few moments. How do we teach our children how to develop as whole and holy people in every way, including in areas of human intimacy? How do we acknowledge and foster covenantal love inside and outside marriage? How does the fact that our tax laws, our health laws, our societal norms are all tilted in favor of marriage impact the lives of all people, especially when marriage is so anchored in patriarchy, property, and domination? Lynn Tonstad, a queer theologian, reminds us that queerness is the activity of undoing dualisms and binaries and distinctions. You see, there are covenantal commitments of love outside the bonds of marriage that are whole and holy and good. And there are marriages that are broken and sinful in need of God's healing mercies. Sins of sex exist in heterosexual relationships and in same sex relationships. They take place whenever power and manipulation overshadow self giving and mutual respect. How do we arrange our socioeconomic and religious norms to acknowledge this and help all people thrive and grow towards wholeness? Tonstad notes that the deepest lie that queer theology attempts to dispel is the lie between deservingness and love. How might we accept that the gift of God given to us in our LGBTQ brothers and sisters and ponder how we might support covenantal love in a profoundly different kind of social life, which isn't just about who one sleeps with, but about the role of friendship, one's relationship to work and leisure, and how one relates to neighbors and strangers. If we reflect, we realize that this is in fact the work that the first century new Christians were doing in light of the gospel of Jesus Christ, as they looked for self-giving and mutuality between man and woman, between slave and free, and between Jew and Gentile. It is wrestling we're still called to do between he, she, and they, between the privileged and the marginalized, between citizen and refugee. It's good work.